Okay, today's something a little bit different. In the past, I've talked about tips and tricks and different things I've discovered through my journey through the motorcycle business here. And prior to that, I also talk a lot about my invention, which is the reverse trike conversion kit, which I actually started on 13 years ago. I spent 5 years in R&D, and in the last 7 years has been production. I'm the first one to come up with the idea. I'm the first one to have a patent, so I have a patent on the entire assembly here. And I'm the only guy in the United States that does this as the primary business. There's 2 other manufacturers that do it kind of as a side business to their trike business, but this is my main thing. This is all I do. I spent a good part of yesterday just doing YouTube videos, watching them, and I came across a bunch of things on the CanAm Spyder, which kind of prompted me to talk a little bit about the whole front end geometry and everything involved. If you've looked at any of my other videos, you'll see that I make a point of not attacking other companies. I never badmouth. I might badmouth in a way the design, but I never talk ill of any company. In my view, anybody who does this type of work is doing excellent work. And I'd never badmouth BRP, the Spyder. If it wasn't for Spyder, I probably wouldn't be doing this, because I got into this because of the experience I had way back in 2008 test driving a Spyder, and I've made a point of that I was very impressed with the idea. I, at that time, wasn't really in favor of getting the Spyder for myself. I thought I would just go ahead and come up with my own idea just for the hell of it. And it worked out, because now I'm building these things pretty much as a business. So anyway, that out of the way here. This is going to be no different. I'm not going to sit here and badmouth anybody or anything, but I am going to talk about a couple things. And I brought it up in other videos about the mental aspects of a laser alignment and that kind of stuff. The guys will, one thing you notice when you go from a motorcycle to a trike, especially a reverse trike like this, is they tend to be fairly quick. And any road irregularities and stuff, they will tend to be a little bit dodgy, is the way the CanAm guys describe it. There are some reasons for that. A lot of it has to do with aerodynamics. I'll talk a little bit about that too in a little bit later here. But the geometry is basically automotive, and the geometry that I'm using is very, very similar to profiles, about the same. Some of the differences between mine and theirs is I'm using shorter A-arms, so I can get a bigger basket in here. And I've got a little different idea on how I set up tie rods and that kind of thing. And I use a much stiffer anti-sway bar. One of the biggest upgrades on the Spyders is they get rid of the original kind of weak and bendy anti-sway, and they put in a heavier one. So I start out with a 3/4 inch sway bar, and that's a cold rolled steel bar that I actually make. I manufacture everything here. So everything you see is what I make. This one here is in the paint shop. So the panels I'm waiting for the panels to come back, and then this one's done. This is a 2014 Honda Valkyrie. So this is the 1800 version of the Valkyrie is what this is. But I recently was watching a deal on the Riker, and the guy was complaining that it was all over the road. And he was going to take it in and get it laser aligned, and right away the red flag went up, because laser alignment is just a glorified tape measure. There's no accuracy improvement whatsoever. And in fact, the only thing you can adjust on a CanAm is toe-in. And toe-in, for the most part, doesn't affect the rideability or the handling of the bike unless it's off quite a bit. And by quite a bit, I mean at least a 1/2 inch. In this particular case, it was kind of astounding, because I'm sitting there thinking he's going to take it in for a front end alignment. They're going to adjust the toe and tell him it was way off. and they adjusted it, you know, 1/8 of an inch. As it turned out, this one was off about 2 inches. It was towed out 2 inches. Now that would make a very noticeable change, and it would make it handle really squirrely. So they were justified in actually doing what they did, and they ended up with the bike running much better than it was previously. They have set it positive 1/2 inch, which is way too much. I don't know where they got the specs on that, but the positive toe should be about 1/4. I set mine anywhere between 1/8 and 3/16. It's not that fussy. Anywhere from 0 to plus or minus 1/4 is not going to affect the driving at all. But what it will do is affect the way the tires wear. And so you have to watch the tires, and I even tell my customers, you know, I set them for 3/16 positive, but I tell them, you know, depending on how you ride, how much weight you put in it, if you ride, you know, 2 up or just 1, it's going to make a little difference on the tire wear. So you have to kind of watch your scuffing on the tires. And I know on my last bike that I built for myself, which was last year, or 2 years ago, we immediately took it on a 6,000 mile trip. And 2,000 miles into the trip, I started to notice a little feathering on the tires. And I turned each tie rod, I believe I had to tow it out, 1/2 turn on each tie rod. And then it was perfect. I didn't adjust it again. So it's a real minor adjustment. You can do it yourself. A tape measure is just as reliable as laser alignment. The big thing with laser alignment is you don't have the body in the way and all this. I have to put special brackets on the rims, because you actually align the rims, you don't align the tires. So I put brackets on there which basically extend out to the front and the back of the tires, so I can run a tape, you know, front to back and get my difference in the measurements. And alignment just eliminates that. You put a device on the rim, and it actually shines out ahead, and it measures the trapezoid convergence of the 2 lines, and that's about it. So, you know, don't fool yourself into thinking that just because it's high-tech laser that it's going to be any more accurate. Laser tape measures, and you've got digital multimeters. Well, the analog units are just as accurate. In fact, I prefer the analog multimeter over the digital one, because you can get a lot of false readings off the digital if you have static and that kind of thing. And you know, laser tapes really aren't much different. So anyway, enough of that. What comprises the whole geometry, though, has a lot more to do than just toe. Some people think, well, if one tie rod is adjusted different to the other, it's going to pull to one side. That's actually technically impossible. You can adjust everything with one tie rod. Your handlebars would be crooked, so you'd be driving like this, you know, instead of like this. But the wheels will self-center. They balance out the differences, and you know, it translates into the handlebars being crooked. So when I first take these out for a test drive, one of the things I do is drive it in an absolute straight line as I can, and then I look at the handlebars. And a lot of times I'll have to adjust maybe 1 turn on each, you know, lengthen one, shorten the other one to get the handlebars square so that they're nice and straight. Caster is important. Now I run about 6.5 degrees, anywhere from 6.5 to 7.5 degrees of caster, which is a positive caster. So the upper E-arm is behind the lower one. On a motorcycle, it's called rake, which is the bearing surface of the triple trees is the rake, not the tubes. The fork tubes, that's fork angle. The bearing surface in the frame is rake. Rake and caster are the same thing. So when a lot of the trike guys say they have a 6-degree rake kit, it's not a rake kit at all. You can only change rake by cutting the frame. What they're doing is they're changing the angle of the tubes in relation to the rake, which reduces the trail, and it does a whole bunch of other stuff, which some good, some not so good. But anyway, so if the caster is uneven between one side and the other, that'll cause the bike to pull to one side. That's number one. That's the number one thing. The other thing would be camber. You know, I normally run about 1 degree positive, because it makes them handle a little bit lighter. If that's off a little bit, it'll gradually drift, but it'll never really pull. So camber is not a big deal. If one of the brakes is dragging, it really won't have much effect unless it's dragging real bad when you grab the brakes and one side's grabbing pretty hard. Then it'll kind of pull to one side. But other than that, it doesn't, it takes quite a bit because of the way I have the scrub set up and the way CanAm does it. The scrub is pretty close to 0. I think I'm running about 3/8 of an inch positive scrub. And scrub is the angle, if you go through the ball joints down to the ground, and then you go through the center of the tire, where those two converge, the difference is called scrub radius. And you want a little bit of positive scrub radius with a rear-wheel drive vehicle. 1/4 inch, 3/8 is about right. What it does is, if you were actually to take off one of the tie rods, you could drive this thing with one tie rod. The other wheel would caster, and it would pull a little bit to one side, and I've done this, but it'll track. And when you turn, the other wheel will turn even though there's no tie rod on there. That means you have a good relationship in the scrub radius. And I actually did test one going that way, and I got it up to 70 miles an hour with one tie rod, so it does work. Not advisable, I would never tell anybody to do it, but it's what you do if you're gonna be a test pilot. But you know, that part of it's kind of built in, because the spindles, you know, I buy the spindles pre-made, so they have the angle, the kingpin declination angles already built into them. What really determines where they converge is the size of the tire, the width of the tire, the offset on the rim. So I actually use a 40 millimeter offset rim to get that relationship right. I'm running the smallest tires I can on a 15-inch rim. CanAm runs the same size tire as this. This is a 165, 60, 15. CanAm runs the same thing, but they're running a narrower rim. And then you run the Kenda tires, which are really not good tires. So they're quite a bit narrower. They're probably 2 inches narrower than this. Some of the other manufacturers are running 16 and 17 inch. I think one of them is actually running 18 inch low profile tires. Huge mistake. What happens with the wider tire is your scrub radius actually will move back and forth. It'll increase and decrease depending on what the road, you know, if it's flat or if it leans a little. So as you're going on the road, you know, the road isn't perfectly flat, it's gonna vary like this. So your scrub is gonna change from one side to the other. It might be a 1/2 inch positive there, it might be 1.5 inches here, and that's gonna cause the trike to drift back and forth. So the more narrow the tire is, the less pronounced that's gonna be, and that makes a big difference. And I've had people say, well, can we run the same tire on the front as we run on the back? Because on the Goldwings and most tires or wheels that are 5.5 inch rims, I'll run car tires on the back also. So you get about 40,000 miles out of a set of tires. And I say, no, you've got to run the smallest wheel possible in the front. But that makes a big difference. You know, it's all these little things that make a difference. There's a couple other things in here I do that are kind of on the down low that I'm not going to share because it makes the difference between mine handling right and other people's not handling so well. So anyway, the only big difference between mine and CanAm is this lower A-arm mount is not fixed to the frame. It's bolted to the frame. I shim these. In fact, there's a couple of shims on the other side here. I can shim those to vary my camber and my caster. So one of the things I check when I build these things is to make sure that the caster is the same on each side within about a 1/2 degree, and that the camber is the same way. So I try to get, you know, everything balanced. That's the whole trick here, is you have to have, because the wheels in a way kind of work against each other. That's why you run a little positive scrub. It actually makes the wheel want to turn out a little bit, and that one wants to turn out a little bit, so they counteract each other. If you set them perfectly neutral, any play in the tie rods or whatever would make the wheels jiggle. So this way, you know, if you run a little positive scrub and you get a little wear in some of your your tie rod joints and that kind of thing, it keeps them snug. So you don't end up with the wheels, jiggling around every time you hit a bump and that kind of thing. So there are some kind of tricks to that. So when I do a front end alignment, it's a real front end alignment. I adjust various things instead of just the toe. In fact, when I'm all done, the very last thing I do is adjust the toe, because that just runs your tire, or determines tire wear. So I guess the long and the short is, don't be all hyperactive about getting alignments. I mean, you can check it with your tape measure. If you measure across the back and the front. I've got a video, I think, on how the poor man's method, where you lay a 1x6 up against the wheel so that you have a measuring point, on each side, and you just pull a tape across front and back, and you can get kind of a rough estimate. If it's off, an inch, you better do something. Here again, though, you watch your tire wear more than anything, and the tires will tell you what's going on. It's no different than looking at the spark plugs in your engine. If they're white, you're running lean and hot. If they're sooty, you're rich, and the engine's probably either running cold, or maybe the thermostat's bad or something, that kind of thing. So there's some indicators there too. And I'm not saying, that you shouldn't take it in and get it laser lined or whatever. I'm just telling you, don't pay $300 to have a laser alignment when some guy says, well, for $25, I'll check it with a tape. Give him the $25 and he'll do just as good a job, I guess, if he knows what he's doing. As far as the numbers, though, I'm really kind of surprised at a 1/2 inch positive toe. That seems too much. The other big thing I'm going to mention along with that is inflation values make a big difference. The amount of air you put in the tire is going to make a big difference on how these things handle. The reverse trikes are kind of sensitive to that. If you overpressure the tires, it gets kind of jumpy, and the wheels get bouncy and that kind of stuff. Important thing to think about in suspension is the tire is the number one suspension component. The shocks and the springs, their main job is keeping the tire on the ground. That's their job. And they absorb the large bumps, but most of the bumps have to be absorbed by the wheel. The more pressure you put in there, the rougher the ride. Plus they tend to bounce, so you're going to get more movement. I think CanAm recommends 12.5 to 17 pounds max. 15 on CanAms would be about right. On the rear, even CanAm is way off on that. I think they say 28. 22 is about right for the CanAms. On the Valkyries and the Goldwings, I recommend 26 because they're a heavier bike and it's a smaller wheel. The CanAm runs a bigger tire, so the bigger tire, the less pressure. But I see a lot of center wear. I just watched a video where the guy was complaining that he's going to buy something other than the Ken does because the whole center wears right out of the tires, and the outside looks just like this. Well, it's because you're running way too much pressure. The tires should wear flat, straight across. If you're not getting that, you got to do something with the pressure, and they'll handle a lot better. Last thing I talked about is aerodynamic profile, which has a lot to do with the build. It doesn't have anything to do with the alignment or any of that. One of the things that a disadvantage to the reverse trike over a wheels back trike, on a wheels back trike, you're basically dragging a parachute from the aerodynamic standpoint. So that tends to stabilize it like the fins on a dart, keep the dart from going straight. When you put a body like this in front of the center of balance, now what you have is you have the center of pressure and ahead of the center of balance. So the larger this shroud is in the front, the worse things are. Because I've had people say that, well, I like a certain brand of reverse trike that's not made here in the United States that has this gigantic, what I call elephantitis fairing in the front, and it's just huge. And they're used to, a trike being this big fiberglass thing. And, mine are kind of a low profile, very sleek looking deal for a lot of reasons. Number one is you got to get that area pressure minimized and that's really kind of why the F3 I think handles better than like the RT, because it has less of this pressure buildup ahead of the center of balance. And on mine, the fronts are open so air can flow right through. In fact, this is about as aerodynamic as when I put the skins on. I try to make it transparent. So that makes a big difference too, on the reverse trike. There's a lot of little nuances that one has to take into account to get these things properly done. So anyway, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the whole CanAm thing and the alignment and all that, just to, you know, here again, they've done a great job. CanAm's done the BRP's expanding. I think they've got like 5 models now. The sport touring ones I really like. I think that's quite a distinctive looking, very well engineered profile. And the Riker's coming along, you know, that's the real affordable one. So they've done a good job on that too. So anyway, today's video was a basic geometry lesson, I guess.